In America, justice is supposed to be blind. But too often, it wears a disguise. Montgomery, Alabama, known for its charm, Southern hospitality, and its long, painful history. Jamal Reed knew all about the past. He'd grown up in its shadow. His grandfather had marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. His father had worked 3 jobs to keep Jamal in school, always reminding him that survival was the foundation for dignity when you wore skin like his. At 32, Jamal had carved out a quiet life. He was a hard worker, honest to the core. A store manager at Wilson's Hardware, a beloved youth basketball coach, and caretaker to his elderly mother, Claudette. His apartment was modest, his days long but fulfilling. He had a girlfriend once, but they'd parted ways when she moved north for law school. He wasn't bitter, just focused. Life for a black man in Montgomery didn't allow for distractions. The sun rose over Taylor Street, as it always did, casting long shadows through the tall oaks. That morning, Jamal jogged past the Baptist church, earbuds playing old soul records. His mother would be up soon, sipping her coffee and flipping through scripture. He always stopped by her house after his morning run, just to say hello. "Good morning, baby," she said as he entered, brushing a kiss on his cheek. "You look tired." "Everything all right. Just busy at the store. Mr. Fisher's having me handle inventory and payroll this week." Claudette smiled. "That's because he trusts you." Jamal smiled back, unaware of how quickly that trust, and everything else, would be called into question. At 9:32 a.m., Jamal arrived at Citizens First Bank. It was his routine every second Thursday, deposit his paycheck and grab a coffee from the cafe next door. The check, made up for $1,238.64, was issued by Wilson's Hardware, signed by Mr. Franklin Fisher himself. The lobby smelled of air conditioning and lemon-scented cleaner. He stood in line behind a woman in business attire, nodding politely when she glanced back. He waited, calm and patient. Next, a voice called. He approached the teller, a young white woman whose nameplate read Megan Turner. Her lips were pressed into a line, her eyes quickly scanning him up and down. He offered a smile and handed her the check along with a filled-out deposit slip. "Good morning," he said. She didn't smile back. Instead, she picked up the check and examined it with furrowed brows. "Where did you get this?" she asked sharply. "It's my paycheck. I work at Wilson's Hardware." "Do you have identification?" "Sure." He handed over his Alabama driver's license. Megan snatched it, turned, and disappeared through a back door without a word. Jamal shifted awkwardly. He glanced around. A security guard at the far end of the lobby looked in his direction. The line behind him grew longer. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, Megan returned, with 2 police officers behind her. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step outside with us," said the taller of the 2, Officer Dan Whitaker. Jamal blinked. "I'm sorry, what's going on?" "This check appears to be fraudulent," Megan said, arms crossed, voice cold. Jamal's heart thudded. "What?" "It's my paycheck. You can call the store and speak to my manager, Mr. Fisher." But they weren't listening. Officer Whitaker grabbed his arm while the second officer, a younger one named Reyes, began reading him his rights. "I didn't do anything," Jamal said as he was escorted outside. "I didn't do anything." People on the sidewalk turned to look. A mother pulled her child closer. A man in a truck sneered and muttered something Jamal couldn't hear. He was placed in the back of the patrol car and taken to Montgomery County Jail. Just like that, everything unraveled. The interrogation. He sat in a cold gray room for 3 hours before anyone spoke to him. His phone was taken. No one had called Mr. Fisher. No one had checked the bank's records. Instead, they questioned him as if they already knew he was guilty. Detective Carl Reddick leaned across the table. He was in his 50s, heavyset, and clearly annoyed to be there. "So," he said, flipping through a folder. "You tried to cash a forged check today?" "It wasn't forged," Jamal said quietly. It's my paycheck. Your name is Jamal Reed. You were arrested in 2014 for misdemeanor trespassing. College prank gone wrong, yeah. Yes, but that was resolved. It was expunged. Reddick chuckled. Nothing's ever really expunged, son. Tell me again how you got this check. I work at Wilson's Hardware. You can ask Mr. Fisher. He'll tell you. But Reddick wasn't listening. You expect me to believe a guy with your history gets a paycheck for $1,200 and it's legit? Jamal felt the sting of it. Not just the words, but the way they were spoken, as if his very existence defied logic. As if a black man with a decent paycheck was somehow a criminal by default. I don't care what you believe, Jamal said, quietly but firmly. I told the truth. Reddick leaned back in his chair, the silence between them loud and suffocating. Behind bars. That night, in a cell shared with 3 others, Jamal lay on a stiff mattress, eyes wide open. A young man named Tyrell asked what he was in for. Trying to deposit a check, Jamal said bitterly. Tyrell laughed a sad laugh. Man, they'll throw us in here for breathing too hard. Jamal thought of his mother, of the panic she must be feeling, of the kids at the youth center wondering where their coach was, of the quiet life he had built now spiraling down the drain. He was assigned a public defender, a man named Brian Kemp, who met with him briefly and assured him it was a misunderstanding. Should clear up soon, Kemp said. We'll request the employer to verify the check. But 3 days passed, then 5, then 7. No word from Mr. Fisher. Then, Megan Turner filed formal charges, check fraud, attempted theft, and intent to defraud a financial institution. Jamal's world shrank with each passing day. A glimmer of hope. On the 12th day, a surprise. Judge Jeremiah Langston, an older black man known for his sharp intellect and no-nonsense demeanor, was assigned the preliminary hearing. Jamal sat in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists and ankles, as Megan Turner took the stand. He was nervous. Evasive, she said. I knew something was wrong. The check didn't match the format we have on file for that company. But did you call the issuing business to confirm before involving law enforcement? Judge Langston asked. She hesitated. No, sir. I didn't think it was necessary. Did you ask the defendant to provide employer information? No, sir. But Langston held up a hand. Enough. He turned his gaze toward the prosecution, then toward Jamal. I'll review the documents. Court will reconvene in 3 days. Until then, the defendant is to remain in custody. Jamal met the judge's eyes for a split second. There was something there, something rare in a courtroom where black men were too often invisible. Recognition. 3 days in jail feel like 3 months. 12 feel like a lifetime. Jamal Reed sat on the lower bunk of his small cell, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. Concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, the constant clang of bars, and the low murmur of men who had lost something: freedom, direction, hope. Every sound echoed like a taunt. The Montgomery County Jail wasn't meant for justice. It was a warehouse of waiting souls, stacked and forgotten. Jamal, once free and full of routine and quiet pride, now stared at a wall stained with time and desperation. He'd been here almost 2 weeks, locked up for nothing more than depositing his paycheck. It was absurd, surreal, but every day behind those bars made the lie feel heavier, more permanent. His cellmate, an older man named Lester "Pop" Hampton, noticed Jamal's silence. Pop had been through the system since the 80s and bore the wear of it in his bones. You ain't gotta say it, Pop said, chewing slowly on a piece of cornbread from the cafeteria tray. I already know. You innocent. Jamal looked up, tired. How can you tell? Pop smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes. Same look in your face I had when they pinned something on me I ain't do. Same look in 100 brothers I seen walk through this hellhole. Jamal nodded slowly, biting down his frustration. You trying to play life right, Pop said. But some people see your skin and already wrote your ending. Legal limbo. Public defender Brian Kemp was a kind man, but overworked and stretched thin. Jamal had only seen him twice since the arrest. The second time, Kemp finally brought papers from Wilson's Hardware verifying Jamal's employment and payroll records. "So, they're confirming it's his check, right?" Jamal asked. "Yes," but Kemp said, sighing, "Megan Turner is now alleging you had prior knowledge of a supposed check scheme being investigated by the bank's fraud unit. She claims your check closely resembled some that had been forged." Jamal's voice broke with disbelief. "You're telling me she's doubling down? Even after my boss confirmed it's real?" "I know," Kemp said. "It's flimsy, but she's sticking to her story. Says you acted suspicious." Jamal stood up. "Suspicious?" "I handed her a check." I smiled. "I gave her ID. What part of that is suspicious?" Kemp had no answer. Jamal lowered his voice. "You think she just hates black men?" Kemp blinked. "Honestly, I think she's scared of black men. And I think she's been given every reason by this society to believe her fear is justifiable." A judge remembers. Judge Jeremiah Langston sat in his chambers late that evening, staring at the file. Jamal Reed. No priors beyond a trespassing incident in college. Solid job. Community involvement. No inconsistencies in his story. His employer had confirmed the check. Langston rubbed his temples. He remembered his own early years, how people flinched when he walked into law school classrooms, how white professors questioned whether he belonged, even with his perfect grades. He remembered the time a bank employee refused to cash a legitimate check from his first law firm, insisting it had to be fake. He saw himself in Jamal, and he knew the smell of a false charge when it was this strong. Langston called a meeting with both counsels for the following morning. In court the next day, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Jamal sat beside Kemp in a tan suit borrowed from Pop's cousin, which was a size too big, but better than the jumpsuit. He looked around, rows of strangers, white faces mostly, including Megan Turner, sitting beside the prosecutor with perfect posture and a cold stare. Langston entered. "All rise." They did. "Be seated." Langston flipped through the documents. "Before we proceed, I would like to ask the prosecution a few questions." The prosecutor, Assistant DA Caroline Weller, stood. "Ms. Weller, are you aware that the defendant's employer verified the legitimacy of the check?" "Yes, Your Honor, but the teller still maintains." "I'm not asking what the teller maintains. I'm asking you, based on the evidence, do you believe a crime was committed?" Caroline faltered. "There are inconsistencies." Langston cut in. "The only inconsistency here is how a black man depositing a verified paycheck ends up in handcuffs without a single phone call made to confirm the check's origin. Do you know how many overdraft or fraudulent check issues are resolved over the phone every day in this country? Thousands. Most of them are never prosecuted. Most of them don't involve arrests. Most of them don't involve jail time." The courtroom was dead silent. Langston turned his eyes toward Megan. "Ms. Turner, do you have any personal history or documented evidence of fraud tied to this defendant?" "No, Your Honor." "Did you see him take anything? Did he threaten you?" "No, but he was nervous, and something just didn't feel right." Langston's jaw clenched. "Your discomfort does not equate to probable cause. Nor is your feeling sufficient reason to ruin a man's life." Vindication, almost. Langston leaned forward. "This court finds that there is insufficient evidence to move forward with any of the charges presented. All charges against Mr. Jamal Reed are hereby dismissed, and the case is closed." Jamal's breath hitched. He looked to Kemp, who placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Jamal blinked slowly, the sound of the judge's gavel crashing like thunder in his ears. But even as the cuffs were removed and the bailiff stepped back, Jamal didn't smile. The room didn't erupt in applause. There were no celebratory cheers. Just silence, and Megan Turner, standing rigidly, arms folded, her jaw tight. Langston stared at her. "This court recommends a formal review of Ms. Turner's actions by Citizens First Bank. If necessary, I will submit a written complaint to the Office of Comptroller of the Currency." Her face went pale. Jamal stood. Free, yes, but also fractured. Back outside. The sunlight felt different now. Harsher. Like it was burning through the mask he used to wear, the one that told the world he was safe, trustworthy, respectable. He exited the courthouse to find his mother waiting. She wrapped him in her arms and kissed his face with shaking hands. "I knew my baby didn't do nothing," she whispered. But behind her, a reporter raised a camera. A headline was already forming. Bank teller falsely accuses local man of fraud. Jamal looked away. Pop's words echoed in his head. "They'll throw us in here for breathing too hard." And now he knew just how right Pop was. 2 weeks had passed since the courtroom thundered with Judge Langston's gavel and the charges were dismissed, but Jamal Reed's life hadn't returned to normal. In fact, it had twisted into something altogether unfamiliar. He was free, yes, but now he was a symbol. A headline. A cautionary tale. And symbols, he quickly learned, don't get to live quietly. Front page fallout. The Montgomery Tribune's front page ran the story. Local man falsely accused of fraud by bank teller. By Denise Whitaker, staff reporter. The article detailed how Megan Turner, a teller at Citizens First Bank, had accused Jamal Reed of attempting to deposit a fraudulent check, despite confirmation from his employer. The judge's scathing rebuke was quoted in full, and there was mention of a pending civil rights investigation. The article circulated fast. In a town like Montgomery, where race still simmered beneath church bells and magnolia trees, it didn't just provoke debate. It cracked open wounds. Some were outraged. Others defended Megan Turner, citing her right to feel safe at her job. Jamal scrolled through comments on the Tribune's social media post that night, sitting on his couch in silence. Another example of reverse racism hysteria. That man was innocent. Poor woman. Probably traumatized. You never know what people are capable of. Systems broken. Glad the judge saw through it. She's not racist. She was just doing her job. What if the check had been fake? He closed the app. His mother came in from the kitchen with a cup of tea. "Stop reading that garbage, baby. It ain't gonna help." He didn't respond. People gon' say what they gon' say. But only God knows the truth. And you know the truth too. Back to the real world. Returning to work wasn't easy. Wilson's Hardware welcomed him back. Mr. Fisher gave him a handshake and a solemn apology. But the store felt different. Customers whispered. Some avoided his register altogether. He caught one woman, a regular, eyeing him nervously near the paint aisle. When he turned to greet her, she flinched. "I'm just looking," she muttered, turning away quickly. Jamal bit down on his tongue. Later that afternoon, Mr. Fisher invited him into the office. "Jamal, listen," the older man said. "I know this isn't easy, and I want you to know I stand behind you. But some customers have been calling, saying they feel uncomfortable. Some are threatening to boycott." Jamal's chest tightened. "So what are you saying?" "I'm not letting you go. I'm not. But I may need to move you to inventory. Less customer-facing, just for a while. Until things cool off." Jamal stood up slowly. "You're punishing me for being innocent." "No, I'm trying to protect the store and you." He shook his head. "You know what I've been through. And now I've got to work in the back because some people can't accept that a black man might be falsely accused and still be worth trusting. I know how it looks." "No," Jamal said. "You don't." He walked out. Megan Turner speaks. 1 week later, Megan Turner broke her silence. A video interview aired on local news. She wore a soft gray blazer, her blonde hair curled neatly. She looked into the camera with carefully rehearsed sorrow. "I never intended to cause harm," she said. "I was following bank protocols. I understand how this has been perceived, but I'm not a racist. I was just doing my job." The reporter leaned in. "But what about Judge Langston's comments?" She nodded slowly. "I respect the court's decision. But I think people are forgetting I was scared." He looked agitated. "I've worked there for years, and I've seen a lot. I just wanted to be safe." The video cut to stock footage of Citizens First Bank, then faded to black. Jamal watched it in silence. His phone buzzed immediately with texts. "You see this BS? She's playing the victim. Unreal. Man, you need to sue them all." He stared at the screen, unmoved. Then he tossed the phone onto the couch. Rising voices. The community didn't stay silent. A local group called Voices for Justice Alabama reached out to Jamal. Led by civil rights activist Deshaun Berry, the group held weekly town hall meetings and rallies to confront systemic injustice. "We want you to speak," Deshaun told him over coffee at Café Selma. "Tell your story. Show people this isn't just a one-off. It's a pattern." "I'm not a public speaker," Jamal said. "You don't have to be," Deshaun said. "You just have to be real." That Friday, Jamal stood on the steps of City Hall, microphone in hand. A crowd of about 300 gathered before him. He swallowed hard, scanning the faces, black, white, young, old. A few cameras pointed his way. "My name is Jamal Reed," he began. 2 weeks ago, I went to deposit a paycheck. Instead, I got handcuffed and locked in jail for 12 days. Why? Because someone saw my skin and made up their mind before I even spoke." He paused. "I didn't come here today to talk about revenge. I came to talk about what happens when you're presumed guilty before you even open your mouth. When being black makes you a suspect even when you've done everything right." The crowd was quiet, listening. "I want Megan Turner to understand something. I don't hate her. But I do want her to understand what her fear cost me. I lost time. I lost dignity. I nearly lost my job. And the worst part? Some folks still look at me like I'm the one who did something wrong." A slow applause began. Then it grew. Deshaun raised his fist in solidarity. Jamal stepped back, heart pounding. He didn't feel powerful, but he felt heard. The lawsuit. 2 weeks later, a civil rights attorney named Adrienne Price contacted him. "I read about your case," she said. "I think you have grounds to file a lawsuit not just against the bank, but also the police department." "I don't want a payout," Jamal said. "This isn't about money," Adrienne replied. "It's about accountability. You were arrested without cause. Jailed. Humiliated. There needs to be a record. Or else it'll happen again. To someone else." He thought about Pop. About Tyrell. About the dozens of black men in that jail who didn't have someone like Judge Langston. "All right," he said. "Let's do it." A widening fire. News of the lawsuit sparked headlines again. Civil rights groups rallied in support. Others, mostly anonymous voices online, accused Jamal of race baiting, money chasing, and trying to ruin an innocent woman's life. At a gas station one night, a white man in a truck shouted at him across the pump. "Why don't you let it go, man? You got out, didn't you?" Jamal didn't respond. The man leaned closer. "You think you're some kind of hero now?" Jamal looked at him calmly. "No. I'm just tired of pretending this didn't happen." The man scoffed and drove off. A letter arrives. One afternoon, Jamal received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with neat handwriting. "Mr. Reed, I want to say I'm sorry. Not for what I did, but for how blind I was. I don't know what made me feel afraid that day. Maybe I do, but I'm ashamed to admit it. You didn't deserve what happened. You deserve to live without fear of being mistaken for something you're not. I hope one day you'll believe I meant no harm. But I understand now that harm doesn't require intent. Sometimes it just needs silence. MT." Jamal stared at the letter for a long time. Then he folded it, placed it back in the envelope, and set it on the shelf beside his father's old Bible. He didn't know if it changed anything. But it meant something. The lawsuit was filed. The city of Montgomery, the Citizens First Bank, and the Montgomery Police Department were all named as defendants. The case sent ripples through the city's foundations, through church pews, courthouse halls, living rooms, and barbershop chairs. Jamal Reed's name was now spoken in the same breath as injustice, accountability, and hope. But none of that felt like victory to Jamal. Because behind the headlines, lawsuits, and speeches was still a man trying to live a quiet, honest life, and that life had been cracked open. New enemies, old wounds. One evening, as Jamal walked home from the grocery store, a black SUV slowed down beside him. The window rolled down. "Hey," a voice barked. Jamal stopped. "Why don't you drop this whole circus, man? You got your freedom. Ain't that enough?" Jamal didn't recognize the voice, but he recognized the hatred in it. Before he could speak, the driver spat out the window in his direction and peeled off down the street. That was the third time in a week something like that had happened. Anonymous threats. Online harassment. Rumors that he had fabricated the whole thing to get money. Some even suggested that Judge Langston, being a black man, had shown bias. Meanwhile, Megan Turner had been placed on administrative leave pending the bank's internal investigation. But leaked emails suggested that bank executives were privately defending her actions. One executive wrote, "We stand by our employees' instincts, especially in high-risk situations." To them, Jamal's skin was a high-risk situation. The pastor's office. Late one night, Jamal sat across from Reverend Isaiah Barnes at New Light Missionary Baptist Church. "You okay, son?" the pastor asked, his voice low and gravelly. "I don't know, Reverend," Jamal said. "I'm angry. I'm tired. I wake up and I feel like I gotta prove I deserve to be seen as human again. That I didn't deserve what happened." The pastor nodded. "You ever read about Joseph?" Jamal gave a dry laugh. "The one who got thrown into a pit by his brothers?" "That's the one. Sold into slavery. Falsely accused. Thrown in prison. But he never stopped being who God made him to be. I'm not Joseph, Reverend. You don't need to be. But you are a man who is falsely accused. And you've got two roads in front of you. One leads to bitterness. The other to something higher. I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to live." The pastor leaned forward. "Then live, Jamal." Loudly. Unapologetically. Because every day you do, you challenge the lie that says you're less than. That's power. That's faith. Behind closed doors. Inside City Hall, meetings were being held, closed-door discussions on how to manage the rising tension. Citizens First Bank was facing mounting pressure from civil rights groups. The police department was dealing with its own PR crisis after it was revealed that the arresting officer had a documented history of racial profiling complaints. Mayor Alice Bright, a moderate white woman, wanted to avoid escalation. "We can't afford riots," she told her staff. "Do what you need to." Quietly. But Judge Langston was not content with silence. In a public address to the city council, he said, "When institutions fail to acknowledge bias, they become complicit in it. If we are to move forward, we must first admit how far we've yet to go." His speech aired on every local news channel. For some, it was a turning point. For others, it was a line in the sand. Family fractures. Jamal's cousin, Malik, had always been more militant than him. "They still treating you like a threat, huh?" Malik asked, pacing in Jamal's apartment. "Told you, man. The system ain't broken. It was built this way." "I know that," Jamal said. "But burning it all down ain't the answer. You still trying to fix it from the inside? That's a long game." Meanwhile, people like her, like Megan, keep getting away with it. Jamal sighed. "I'm not trying to get her back. I'm trying to make sure this doesn't happen again." Malik shook his head. "They don't care about lawsuits or speeches. They only care when they lose money or when they're afraid. That's it." Jamal didn't argue. He was too tired. But his cousin's anger was a mirror to something deep in himself, something Jamal was working hard to control. A surprising invitation. One morning, Jamal received a letter in the mail. Not handwritten. This one was formal. Office of Diversity and Community Partnerships. Citizens First Bank, Central Alabama Region. Community Roundtable Invitation. Mr. Reed. In response to recent events, Citizens First Bank is organizing a community roundtable to engage in open dialogue regarding bias, safety, and trust in banking institutions. We believe your voice would be a critical part of this conversation. We hope you will consider joining us as we take steps toward healing and understanding. Sincerely, Angela Meadows, Director, Community Partnerships. Jamal read it twice. The bank. The same bank that had allowed him to be arrested without a shred of due process. Now, they wanted dialogue. His first instinct was to tear the letter up. But after sitting with it for a day, he called Adrian, his attorney. They're trying to manage the damage, she said. But this is also an opportunity. If you're in that room, you can say things they're not used to hearing. And they'll have to listen. I don't want to help them save face. Maybe not. But maybe you help the next person who walks in with a check and brown skin. Maybe that person doesn't get cuffs. That night, Jamal replied, I'll be there. Round table. The round table took place in a conference room on the 10th floor of Citizens First Bank's downtown headquarters. Glass walls. Neutral decor. Platters of sandwiches and bottled water set on the table like a peace offering. There were executives in suits, community leaders, pastors, business owners, activists, including Deshaun and Jamal. Megan Turner wasn't there. Angela Meadows opened the meeting with practiced professionalism. We're here to talk openly. To listen. To learn. When it was Jamal's turn, he stood, cleared his throat, and faced the room. I didn't come here to make anyone comfortable, he began. Because what happened to me wasn't comfortable. And if you're not willing to feel even a fraction of that, then this whole thing is just performance. A few executives shifted in their chairs. I was arrested for depositing my paycheck. No weapon. No threat. Just skin. That's all it took. Angela nodded solemnly. We hear you. No, Jamal said. You're hearing me now. But what matters is what happens when no cameras are on. When the next black man walks up to the counter with a check. He paused. You want to rebuild trust? Start by firing people who act on bias. Change your training. Change your default settings. Because right now, the default says, guilty until proven innocent, if you're black. The room was silent. One executive, a younger black man named Raymond Hill, looked visibly shaken. I've worked here for 8 years, Raymond said quietly. I've seen the double standards. I didn't speak up enough. That ends now. Others nodded. Jamal sat down, feeling the weight lift, just a little. Aftermath. A week later, Citizens First Bank announced it was launching an internal racial bias audit. Megan Turner's employment status was under review. A new policy required all large check deposits to undergo verification before any detainment or accusation. The police department released a public statement vowing to reevaluate arrest procedures and invest in officer bias training. None of it changed what had happened. But it meant someone was paying attention now. The winds in Montgomery had shifted, but Jamal Reed wasn't sure which way they were blowing. He had become a reluctant public figure, the centerpiece in a conversation that had long been overdue. But as his lawsuit gathered momentum and the media swirled around his story, something inside him began to crack. Not from pressure. From exhaustion. Because for every person who stood beside him, there were still those who saw him as the problem. And sometimes, when he looked in the mirror, he wasn't sure what he saw anymore. A deepening battle. Jamal's civil case was formally accepted by the federal court system. Depositions were scheduled. His attorney, Adrian Price, began preparing him for testimony. This won't be easy, she said. They're going to dig into your past. Even irrelevant stuff. They'll paint you as unstable, dishonest, anything to justify what happened. I've got nothing to hide, he replied. That doesn't matter. They'll try anyway. Citizens First Bank had hired one of the most powerful law firms in the South, Colton and Bryce, LLP. The same firm that once defended a Fortune 500 CEO accused of race-based hiring discrimination. The city and police department were cooperating, but privately, word leaked that they were looking for a settlement. A quiet end, but Jamal wasn't ready to settle. Not yet. Because every time he considered moving on, he remembered the feel of cold steel cuffs around his wrists. The humiliation. The hours in the holding cell with men who had lost count of their arrests. He remembered Pop, who never lived to see justice. No. He wasn't done yet. Media storm. CNN picked up the story. So did MSNBC, BET, and a dozen podcasts. Jamal was asked to appear on Real Talk with Tony Fields, a syndicated radio program known for confronting issues of race in America. Tony didn't sugarcoat it. "You've become the face of something bigger, Jamal," he said live on air. "How does that feel?" Jamal exhaled. "Heavy. Like I can't breathe some days. Like I'm fighting a battle I didn't ask for." Tony nodded. "But you're fighting. And people are watching." Later that day, Jamal's inbox filled with messages. Some encouraging, some venomous. "Thank you for standing up. Hope you win this for all of us. You're a disgrace. Race card-playing thug. She was just doing her job. You're milking it." He stopped reading after that. The protest. When a leaked document revealed that Citizens First Bank executives had privately referred to Jamal's situation as a minor PR inconvenience, community outrage exploded. Voices for Justice Alabama organized a protest. Hundreds marched down Dexter Avenue, past the church where Dr. King once preached, past the courthouse, and toward the bank's downtown headquarters. Signs waved in the humid air. Black innocence is not a threat. Accountability, not apologies. Justice for Jamal. Jamal was there, but not on the mic this time. He marched silently, his mother at his side, gripping his hand tightly. Near the bank entrance, tensions flared. A group of counter-protesters, waving American flags and support law enforcement banners, began shouting, "Thug, go back where you came from. Maybe don't forge checks next time." A bottle flew. Then a rock. Police moved in quickly, forming lines between the groups. Shouts rose. Pepper spray hissed. Jamal stood still as chaos swirled, holding onto his mother's arm, refusing to let go. He whispered to himself, "Don't give them what they want." A familiar name returns. Then something unexpected happened. Meghan Turner requested to speak at a reconciliation panel organized by a local interfaith coalition. At first, many community leaders rejected the idea. But after long debate, the panel agreed on one condition: Jamal had to approve. When Adrian brought the request to him, he was speechless. "She wants to speak? Now," he said. "After all this?" "She says she wants to acknowledge what she did. Publicly." Jamal stared at the floor for a long time. "You think it's real?" Adrian shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe it's strategic. Either way, she won't be the last Meghan Turner in this country. What matters is what we do with people like her." The panel. It took place in the community room at Jefferson Hall, hosted by the Montgomery Interfaith Coalition. The theme was truth and repair. Local clergy, activists, and citizens attended. Cameras lined the back wall. Meghan Turner sat on the stage, hands folded, her face pale but composed. When it was her turn, she stood. "I know many of you don't believe me, and I don't blame you," she began. "I made a decision that day based on fear that wasn't grounded in evidence, but in prejudice. I thought I was protecting myself. I wasn't. I was weaponizing my bias." She looked at Jamal, seated in the front row. "I saw a black man, and I saw a threat. And that is a truth I have to live with." A few gasps rippled through the crowd. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm here to say, I was wrong. And I have work to do." Silence followed, then a single clap, then another. Jamal remained still, unreadable. After the event, he was approached by a teenage black boy who said, "I saw what you did. And I want to be like you." Jamal's throat tightened. "Don't be like me," he said softly. "Be better." The deposition. A week later, Jamal sat in a sterile conference room with his attorney, facing lawyers from Colton and Bryce, who flanked the table like sharks. The lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Graham Thorne, leaned forward. "Mr. Reed, did you ever raise your voice at the bank?" "No." "Did you use any threatening language?" No. Were you aware of the bank's policy on large check deposits? It doesn't say to call the cops on people who don't look like you. Adrian placed a calming hand on his arm. The deposition continued for 6 grueling hours. By the end, Jamal felt hollow. But he didn't let them see it. The breaking point. That night, alone in his apartment, Jamal finally let it out. The anger, the pain, the nights in jail, the constant judgment, the pressure to be perfect even while bleeding inside. He punched the wall, then sank to the floor, shaking. His mother found him there an hour later. "I can't keep doing this," he whispered. "I'm tired." She held his head in her hands. "Baby, you were tired before you even walked in that bank. You were tired when you watched your daddy get stopped for nothing. When they followed you in stores. This ain't new. I don't want to be a symbol. You don't have to be. You just have to stand." She kissed his forehead. "And I'll be standing right next to you." The trial date. A court date was set. People began to line up behind Jamal, not just in Montgomery, but across the country. A group of lawyers volunteered to assist. Students at Howard University wrote essays about his case. A filmmaker reached out about a documentary. The nation was watching. But for Jamal, it came down to one thing: the truth. He stood before the courthouse on the day of the hearing and looked up at the stone pillars, tall and unmoving. "I didn't ask for this," he murmured to Adrian. "I know," she said. "But you were chosen anyway." The courtroom was quiet, like the hush before a storm. It had taken more than a year to reach this moment. A year since Jamal Reed walked into a bank with a paycheck and left in handcuffs. A year since he stood before the world and said, this was not okay. Now, the people of Montgomery and beyond were watching to see what justice would look like when the system was on trial, not the man. And sitting at the center of it all was the man who had refused to disappear. The courtroom. Jamal sat between his attorney Adrian Price and a paralegal, shoulders back, hands folded. He wore a deep navy blue suit his uncle had tailored for the occasion. Clean, grounded, defiant. Across the courtroom sat the attorneys representing Citizens First Bank, the Montgomery Police Department, and the city of Montgomery. A phalanx of suits and tight faces. Judge Harold Langston presided. His dark robe flowed like a shadow of authority. And though his face remained impassive, those who'd been in his courtroom before knew he listened deeply. He had seen this country change. He had also seen how much had stayed the same. The jury was racially mixed, 4 black, 5 white, 2 Latino, 1 Asian. They had been screened, questioned, scrutinized. But no one could predict how they'd decide. The arguments. Adrian began with clarity and force. This case is not about a misunderstanding. It's about humiliation. About a man, Mr. Jamal Reed, being presumed guilty because of the color of his skin, not the content of his actions. Let's be clear. He was calm. He presented valid ID. His check cleared. But none of that mattered, because someone decided his blackness was a threat. And the system agreed. She turned to the jury. He lost his freedom that day. He lost his dignity. And he could have lost his future. Graham Thorne, lead counsel for the bank, responded smoothly. This case, ladies and gentlemen, is about protocol. Ms. Turner followed a reasonable process. Was it uncomfortable? Yes. But in banking, caution is critical. The fact that Mr. Reed is black should not cloud your judgment in assessing whether bank employees acted within reason. Adrian stood again. He wasn't judged by protocol. He was judged by prejudice. And today, you get to judge the system in return. The testimonies. The trial unfolded over several days. Jamal took the stand. He spoke clearly, with pain but without anger. I've been followed in stores before. Pulled over for no reason. But this was different. I had done everything right. I was told I didn't belong in that bank, not because of what I did, but because of who I was. Adrian asked him softly, "Did you feel safe that day?" He paused. "No. I felt hunted." Megan Turner testified. Her voice was shakier than before. "I didn't want to ruin his life. I was scared. I thought the check was fake. I didn't see him. I saw a risk." Adrian cross-examined. "You saw a black man, didn't you?" Megan nodded. "You never called the number on the check stub. Never verified with the employer. You just assumed." Megan's voice broke. "I'm sorry." But the apology hung in the air like smoke, thin and quickly vanishing. An officer testified that the arrest was made to err on the side of caution. But under Adrian's questioning, he admitted he did not verify the details before detaining Jamal. The employer confirmed the check was real and that Jamal was an exemplary worker. One juror wrote something down at that moment. The city holds its breath. Outside the courthouse, media vans lined the curb. Protesters gathered with signs. Supporters lit candles. Schools held moments of silence. The mayor declined to comment. Inside, Judge Langston gave his final instructions to the jury. Then, they deliberated. 6 hours passed. Then 7. Finally, just after sunset, the court clerk announced, "The jury has reached a verdict." The verdict. Everyone stood. Jamal clenched his fists beneath the table. The clerk read aloud. "In the matter of Reed versus Citizens First Bank, Montgomery Police Department, and the City of Montgomery, we the jury find in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Jamal Reed." A quiet gasp rolled through the room. "We further find that Citizens First Bank acted with reckless disregard and racial bias. We award compensatory damages in the amount of $2.5 million. Additionally, we find punitive damages are warranted in the amount of $3 million. Jamal's knees buckled. He sat slowly, tears gathering in his eyes. He had won. He had been seen. Fully. Truly. The courtroom exploded into hushed cheers and muffled sobs. Outside, the crowd roared. After the dust, Jamal didn't throw a party. He didn't make a victory speech. He went home, sat on the couch his father once napped on, and cried. But the phone didn't stop ringing. Requests for interviews, offers from publishing houses, even a call from the governor's office congratulating him on helping open the eyes of a state. The city passed a new ordinance banning the immediate detainment of civilians during financial disputes unless a warrant was issued. Citizens First Bank rolled out bias training and publicly apologized. Meghan Turner resigned. The officer was suspended. But none of that restored the time Jamal had lost. The peace stolen from him. The slow erosion of trust that would never fully return. He wasn't naive. Justice was not a destination, it was a constant fight. The last conversation. Months later, Judge Langston asked Jamal to meet him privately in chambers. When Jamal arrived, Langston stood, robe unbuttoned, hands behind his back. "You did something few people have the strength to do," Langston said. "You looked at the mountain and didn't flinch." "I almost gave up," Jamal admitted. Langston nodded. "Almost. But you didn't. And because of that, someone out there will walk into a bank tomorrow and be treated with dignity. Maybe just one. Maybe hundreds." He extended his hand. "You changed something, son." Jamal shook it. Firm. Honest. Then he turned and walked out of the chambers, not as a victim. Not even just as a survivor. But as a man who faced the weight of history and stood tall. Epilogue. The money helped. He paid off his mother's house, funded a local scholarship, and started a nonprofit aimed at educating young people on their rights when dealing with law enforcement and financial institutions. But what meant the most were the letters. From young black men across the country. "You made me believe in fighting back. Thank you for not staying silent. I see myself in you." And from a 15-year-old girl in Georgia. "Mr. Reed, I wrote a paper about you in class. My teacher cried. You're my hero." Justice didn't heal everything, but it mattered. And Jamal Reed? He was no longer a symbol. He was a man. Unbreakable.